Hello and welcome to EU Untangled, the podcast that untangles EU policy and politics. I'm your host, Victor Aguilar, and today I'm joined by my colleague, Martina Domladovac.
Hello, hi.
It's Martina's first time behind the mic, but not her first time on the pod. She has been working with us already for a while, and we're super happy to have her as a co-host today. The episode that we have for you will revisit the life of one of the founding parents of the European Union, Robert Schuman. And trust me, there is plenty of things that bear Schuman's name. There is a roundabout, a whole neighborhood, a metro station, and the European Parliament's traineeship program is also named after Robert Schuman, the Schuman traineeship. And there is also the Schuman Declaration itself, of course. But it all begs the question, who was Schuman? Who was this person whose name is all over the place, at least in Brussels, the European capital? And what was his main contribution to the EU?
Well, Victor, before jumping into Schumann's life, we want to make it clear who we're talking about. Because, for example, if you try to Google him, your first result might be the other famous Robert Schuman.
Wait a second, there is another famous Robert Schuman?
Oh, yes. We're, of course, talking about a German composer who lived in 19th century. Interestingly, they're not related. And even their last name is written slightly differently. For example, double N for a German composer is typical for Germany, while last name spelled with one N is usually a French adaptation to German last name, which is the name of our Robert Schuman.
The real question is, does Robert Schuman still matter today? What is his legacy? And I guess the easy answer is that his legacy is the European Union. However, it's not the European Union that we know today. What he did is he planted the seed for the European Union institutions. He set out the blueprint, starting with the European Coal and Steel Community. Before we dig into his life, we just want to remind you that EU Untangled is an independent podcast. All the opinions expressed in this podcast are solely ours and cannot be attributed to any third party. Let's roll.
Let's roll.
So let's start at the beginning. Jean-Baptiste Nicolas Robert Schuman is what we could call the quintessential European. He is born a German citizen in Clausen, in Luxembourg, on the 29th of June, 1886. He inherits his father's German citizenship. And just as a fun fact, his father was actually a Frenchman who became German when the region he lived in was annexed by Germany. And this region was the region of Alsace. So back to Robert Schuman. He becomes French only in 1919 when the region of Alsace-Lorraine, where he lived, was returned back to France. So there is this ping-ponging between Germany and France for this region that dates back a couple of centuries. And with this ping-ponging goes also Robert Schuman's citizenship. So Schumann's mother tongue is actually Luxembourgish, and one can only wonder if this upbringing and the unique circumstances of his birth shaped his politics and his drive to reconcile Franco-German relations.
Well, this is definitely something that we'll try to untangle today. But first, let's start with his upbringing and his family situation. So his father, Jean-Pierre Schuman, was a native of Lorraine. He was born a French citizen, and he also became German when Lorraine was annexed by Germany in 1871. His mother, Eugene Suzanne de Rennes, was a Luxembourger. He didn't have any siblings, so he was an only child. We don't know, maybe that means something.
Depends who you ask. If you ask a psychologist like myself, maybe.
He also never married. And this is actually one interesting fact about his life. He even contemplated becoming a priest after his mother, who he was really, really close with. So she died when he was 25. But in the end, he chose like a civilian layman life. But reportedly, and this is maybe even more interesting, he stayed voluntarily celibate for the rest of his life.
Wow. Okay, that is a fun fact. It is true. We have no evidence that he ever married or that he had any children or a reported relation with someone. So we can, I guess, conclude that he was perhaps married to his vocation.
maybe we can.
But you mentioned also that Schuman contemplated at some point becoming a priest. Tell me more about Schumann's religion and his views.
That's actually a very important part of his life. So he was very, very devoted Catholic, and he actually believed democracy owed its existence to Christianity.
Wow, that's a stretch. What exactly did he believe?
Well, I don't know what would Greeks say, the old ancient Greeks who actually invented democracy and were not famously Christian at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But according to him, democracy and Christianity are strongly linked because democracy owes its existence to Christianity. So Schumann's life and worldview were strongly influenced by Catholicism, and he often tried to defend his political ideas as being a Christian humanist. He felt that he was an instrument in the hands of divine providence to undertake a mission for his country rather than designer of that mission. So this is a very interesting perspective of how he saw his own role and how deeply he placed it into a divine. But there is also one important fact, and that's that he believed in the strong separation of church and the state.
So this is interesting because on the one hand, Schuman is what you could consider a conservative because of its deep religious beliefs, but at the same time, he's a bit of a libertarian, believing in the separation between state and church.
I guess so. He was centrist in a way, but he was conservative in his beliefs. But on the other hand, it's fair to say that he never wanted like a strong church influence into political matters.
Okay, so only child, never married, deeply Catholic. What else?
Well, before going into his political life and his political decisions, I think it's important to mention that recently Schuman was actually defined as venerable by Catholic Church. So basically in 2021, Pope Francis approved a decree recognizing the heroic virtues of Robert Schuman, which is, and you might be surprised, a milestone of the process that could lead to his canonization, or, in other words, sainthood.
Wait a second. So you're saying that by being recognized by the Pope as venerable, he's a step closer to becoming a saint?
That is the first step, Victor.
Saint Robert Schuman?
It could be. But for that to happen, he has to perform at least 2 proven miracles.
He's dead already. How is he supposed to perform 2 miracles?
Well, I think miracles are usually performed by people who already died. So from the heavens.
So that's another milestone. You have to die in order to be able to become a saint. Sorry, I don't know a lot about Catholicism.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that people who are still alive haven't become saints while they were alive. So you first have to die, and then you have to perform some miracles.
Okay.
And then those miracles have to be proven.
Yeah. How do you prove a miracle?
Well, there is a process. It's not easy, but there is definitely a process. And then you're a saint and people can pray to you and you can grant their wishes.
Okay, so if we go back to our Robert Schuman, he's like, okay, Schuman Declaration, check. Roundabout, check. Dead, check. Venerable, check. So the next milestone for him will be to become a saint. Wow, what a life.
What a trajectory. Hopefully, Victor, it's going to happen during our lifetimes. So we can pray to Saint Schuman.
I'll definitely pray to Saint Schuman before doing my EPSO competition and try to get into the European Union institutions.
I think maybe those are kinds of miracles that church would take into consideration.
Yeah, so you're saying that if I make it into the European Commission as an official, that would be a miracle. Wow, Martina.
I would never say that.
That's a low blow for me. Okay, back to Schuman. So he's deeply Catholic. He's raised in the most European possible way in a region that sits at the border of several countries, speaking multiple languages. Growing up, he studies also multiple subjects: law, economics, political philosophy, theology, statistics. He's also kind of a mobile student of his time, a bit of an Erasmus, a predecessor of the program, because he studies at the University of Bonn, Munich, Berlin, and Strasbourg. He eventually receives a law degree from Strasbourg University with the highest possible distinction. And shortly afterwards, he sets up his own law practice in Metz in 1912. 2 years later, 1914, World War I breaks out, and Schuman is excused from military service on medical grounds, and he is assigned to a non-combatant unit, so he doesn't take an active role in that war. When the First World War ends is when Schuman's political life begins, as a member of the French Parliament for the Moselle Department, today under the Grand Est administrative region of France. So it is his background as a lawyer and his knowledge of French that makes him an asset to actively participate in the delicate reintegration of Alsace-Moselle into France at the time.
That is all very interesting, but now we are coming to the, let's say, dubious part of his life.
Wait, you just said that he's on his way to becoming a saint. How come there is something dubious about him?
I think, Victor, you'll be surprised to know that all the saints of Catholic Church had some dubious decisions in their life. But also you have to...
Okay, that's why I have trust issues, because if you cannot trust a saint, who can you trust in this world?
I think you also have to do some things bad in your life so you can repent, and then that makes you more saint.
So tell us about Schuman's sins.
So his trajectory during the Second World War is interesting, to say the least. So first of all, in 1938, the fear of new war in Europe made him welcome the Munich agreements. So just to remind everybody, Munich agreement was signed in September 1938, and it was basically a settlement reached by Germany, Great Britain, France, and Italy that allowed German annexation of Sudeti. That's a region in Western Czechoslovakia. So Western allies did that to avoid a war, but it was largely seen as a betrayal of Western country towards a smaller Eastern European country that wasn't in a position to defend itself.
Because this is when Hitler is already annexing territory, right?
Exactly.
He's starting his expansionist moves, and then this Western alliance of countries almost make him a sort of peace offering. They think if we give him the Sudetenland, then Hitler might stop and not grab any more territory.
Something like that. Well, he already took Austria, and then he took this Czech region, which was important because of its industry. And it was a big crisis. And in this Munich meeting, Great Britain and France actually decided to bow down and say, okay, like this is the last thing. We don't want to start another war. And Schuman was one of the politicians, let's say, who approved of this move.
So he was okay with this?
Yes, he was okay with this, but he was always trying to avoid war. But on the other hand, we know how the situation ended. And it's really hard to approve anything that Nazis and Hitler did.
I second that.
So in March 1940, when the World War already began, as an elected representative from his region, Schuman was appointed as Under-Secretary of State for Refugees in Paul Renaud's government. So this government was very short-lived, so only from March to 16th of June 1940. And Schuman was chosen as a, let's say, minister of refugees because he was from the region that was annexed by Hitler by that time. And there was a lot of French refugees that were going to France. And since he was an expert for that region, he was chosen to, let's say, deal with that. So on 16th June 1940, Paul Renaud's government was dissolved and Marshal Philippe Pétain takes power. On 22nd June, France signed armistice with Germany and French government moved to Vichy. That's why this period of French history is known as Vichy France. So Vichy France was an authoritarian regime which closely collaborated with Nazi Germany. Schuman was also confirmed as Under-Secretary of State for Refugees in Pétain's government as well.
So he stays in the same role that he had before Pétain's government.
Exactly. And interestingly, on July 10th, 1940, Schuman voted with majority of the National Assembly to give full powers to Pétain, which effectively made him a dictator.
It made Pétain a dictator.
Exactly.
Not Schuman.
Not Schuman. So that was an interesting scene in French history when basically National Assembly voted to take away its own powers and make one person essentially a dictator. For Schuman, he didn't stay in this government. He actually resigned by the end of August and he returned to his region.
So he basically votes Pétain in.
Exactly.
And then he says, I'm not okay with this. And he leaves. His post in the government goes back home, so to say.
Exactly, goes back home.
In disagreement with what's going on, but having already also taken actively a decision in a very controversial moment in French history.
I know you're surprised. We are all surprised. We don't know why this happened.
I did not know this.
We don't know what was going through his head. But by the end of August, he returned to his region. And only 2 weeks later, he was arrested by Gestapo for acts of resistance. He was imprisoned for a while. And the story goes that he was already on his way for a Dachau concentration camp when one of the occupying officers in this region made it so that Schuman was placed under house arrest instead in Germany. So from April 1941 until August 1942, he was under house arrest in Germany when he escaped and ran to unoccupied France and basically spent the rest of war hiding in various convents in France.
Of course, in a convent.
Of course. Luckily, he was very well connected with Catholic Church, so he had a lot of choices. But it wasn't all that fun because he also had a 100,000 Reichsmark reward on his head.
Is that a lot? Was that a lot of money?
We can only assume.
Okay.
At that time, he also joined French resistance.
Right. So we see that Schuman was not just a saint. So here we see controversial decisions he made, but also in a way, he is also not okay with that. And he goes from being part of this Vichy government to actively quitting the government, being arrested by the Gestapo, almost being sent to a concentration camp, put under house arrest, and then joining the French resistance. That's a very interesting parkour.
And that's only in the span of 2 years.
Wow.
Well, his biopic would be an interesting story.
I think so. Who would play Robert Schuman?
I can't think of anyone bureaucratic enough.
Oh, I can think of a few people who could be bureaucratic enough.
A few actors?
Oh, actors. I think Jude Law could do it.
Well, he has a range.
Yeah, he does. All right, so the Second World War ends. And with the Second World War ending comes the liberation of Paris, 25th of August, 1944. And shortly afterwards, in September of that same year, General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny, the commander of the French First Army, is making his way for Alsace. And he's in need of an experienced political advisor on all things Alsace-Lorraine. And he thinks of none other than Robert Schuman for this role. He's well-known, knows his stuff about Alsace-Lorraine, and he speaks French.
Surprise, surprise.
Ticks all the boxes. So he's named as a political advisor, but 3 weeks later, according to the Robert Schuman Foundation, the then French Minister of War, André Ditelme, demanded, and here I quote, that this product of Vichy be immediately kicked out. And while the city of Metz enthusiastically welcomes back Robert Schuman, the government treats him like a former minister of Pétain and as a parliamentarian who gave him full powers, which I guess technically he did.
Yes, Victor, not everyone voted for Pétain at that time.
He voted with the majority, but he voted in favor.
Exactly, but not everyone did.
That's why you shouldn't jump off a cliff if all your friends are jumping off a cliff. You might be tempted, but you still have a choice. Anyways, so the result is that Schuman is considered as indigne or unworthy and therefore is ineligible for public office. But Schuman doesn't give up. He remains active. He actually helps establish the Popular Republican Movement, a Christian democratic political party that is founded in November 1944 in France during the Fourth Republic. And unsurprisingly, its base was the Catholic vote. But Schuman is eager to resume his political life. Founding a party is not enough. He wants to have political responsibilities. He feels that he owes something to his country, to his region. So he ends up writing to none other than Charles de Gaulle in July 1945 to ask him to intervene, do something. I cannot be unworthy all my life. And it was actually the general's intervention that closed Schuman's case. And a dismissal of charges in his favor was pronounced by the High Court Commission in September 1945. And with this, Schuman was able to play again an active role in French politics. And just to remind you, at this time, Schuman is only 59 years old.
Someone would say only, someone would say already.
Hey, a youngster, very young age for everything that has happened.
Exactly, two world wars.
Yeah, and still alive and back into public life. And it is now that Schuman has a number of high-level political posts, ministerial posts. He's Minister of Finance in 1946, Prime Minister in 1947, Foreign Minister between 1948 and 1952, and Minister of Justice in 1956. And in these roles, he becomes a key negotiator of major treaties and initiatives, such as the Council of Europe, the Marshall Plan, and NATO. They're all aimed at increasing cooperation within the Western Alliance and in favor of unity. But what would cement Schuman's name in the history books is his work as foreign minister, when he advocated for European countries to work towards merging their economic interests by creating a European coal and steel community, whose members would pool coal and steel production. So we'll go into the details of what would come to be known as the Schuman Declaration in a moment.
Whoa. You're jumping ahead, Victor. Plenty of things happened before Schuman became foreign minister.
That's why I said in a moment, not right now.
So before we go into his most productive years, let's paint a picture of France in that time. So it's post-World War. There's political instability, inflation. France is fighting revolts in colonies, and there is workers' unrest almost all the time. Interestingly, France was also governed by so-called tripartite government, which went on from the end of Second World War to 1947. And it basically means that country was ruled by a three-party alliance of communists, socialists, and Christian Democrats. During the so-called May Crisis in 1947, the government collapsed when they decided to exclude communist ministers from participating. So why this happened? Officially, because communists refused to continue support for French colonial reconquest of Vietnam, and also they refused a wage freeze during a period of hyperinflation. But unofficially, US warned that presence of communists in the government would block all American aid.
No Marshall Plan for those wearing red.
No Marshall Plan for you. So since France was starved for American aid, they made a decision to actually exclude communist ministers from the government. And since Communist Party was one of the most popular parties in the country at that time, there was, of course, a political crisis in the country. Paul Ramadier, the prime minister who excluded the communists from the government coalition, resigned in November 1947, and he was replaced by none other than Robert Schuman. So it's also interesting what Schuman had to deal with when he became a prime minister for this short period of time. So he became a prime minister on November 24th, and on November 29th, there were massive strikes and demonstrations in France. 30,000 miners, railway and textile workers protested, and around 100 people got injured in clashes with riot police. So Schuman would be prime minister for less than a year.
Classic French prime ministership.
So from November 1947 to July 1948. But he would be a prime minister again.
Classic.
In 1948, but only for 6 days.
So that same year, he goes back to being prime minister for 6 days.
Exactly. He had to keep it interesting.
Yeah, of course. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about Robert Schuman today.
One other interesting thing happened in October 1948. Schuman was already a foreign minister at that time, but still a part of the government. Around 400,000 coal miners in France went on strike to protest a pay cut. It was a massive event. Government sent police and tanks to crush the rebellion and put thousands in jail. And nearly 3,000 workers were fired in retaliation. This is interesting event considering that coal miners were under enormous pressure at that time. They were digging virtually non-stop to get electricity and heating back on during the harsh post-war years when France, but also the rest of the Europe, lacked coal and raw materials needed for reconstruction. At a time when oil was still scarce and nuclear power was non-existent, coal was truly a crucial resource.
And just to make it clear, here Robert Schuman is already foreign minister. There is this gigantic strike of coal miners in France. Thousands are put in jail. Thousands are fired. Tanks are sent to crush the rebellion. We're not saying that Robert Schuman was responsible for that, but he is part of the government that is in power. And I think this just goes on to show the enormous importance that this critical raw material at the time, coal, probably still today to a certain extent, played in the economy of the country and in the social fabric of the country.
Exactly. Coal at that time was something like oil today, maybe even more important. And especially for the post-war economic reconstruction, there was a great competition for energy and for useful raw materials, also iron, not just coal. And there was a legitimate fear that this competition for energy in particular might easily rekindle nationalist violence in Europe. There was this other issue, and that's the danger of communism and Soviet Union that was coming from the East. So in France and other Western European countries, there was this idea that this Western model or like capitalist model of reconstruction has to succeed. So it has to show results fast. Otherwise, like working class could be inclined to be more sympathetic towards communism and messages that were coming from the east of the border.
Where the grass could look greener.
Or rather.
Indeed.
So basically, by placing the coal and steel under a common authority, Schuman in the way found immediate solution to the problems of that specific moment. First of all, there was the pooling of resources necessary for the economic reconstruction of Western Europe. Then there was the integration of federal Germany, so also known as Western Germany, into the European model, thus consolidating the bloc of free nations facing the Soviet Union. Then there was a recognition of Germany, which also made France more secure. But also, there was a long-term vision in a way, because with that move, he opened the space for something bigger to strive for.
And here what you're talking about is basically the Schuman Declaration already, the ideas that he put into it. So how all of these events converge into the possibility of putting something together that goes beyond the actual moment and that starts sketching out what could be the beginning of a bigger, more intertwined community of nations that are all vying for the same scarce resource, in this case, coal.
Yes, we could say that he killed multiple flies with that one move.
A few birds with one stone.
With one declaration.
One declaration to rule them all. So how did this happen? This drafting process is interesting because, of course, it bears Schuman's name. And while he oversaw the preparation of the declaration within his ministry as Minister of Foreign Affairs, the declaration itself was written by his collaborators, among which stands out the name of one Jean Monnet, who could be considered another of the founding fathers of the European Union.
So are you saying European Union has two fathers?
I think if we were to say that to Catholic Robert Schuman, this would be somewhat controversial, but I'd say that that is not unfair, and probably it's not just fathers, but probably also a few mothers. And we'll probably have the chance to talk about the multiple people that have shaped the European Union into what it is today, because
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, because as somebody said famously, Europe will not be made all at once or according to a single plan. It will be built through concrete achievements which first create a de facto solidarity. And this is just to say that Europe probably is not finished today. It will continue evolving. So anyways, plenty of quotable quotes in the Schuman Declaration. But if we start digging into this document, which is actually surprisingly short, I had never read it before this podcast episode, and I was surprised by the clarity of the sentences that are written into it. The opening line is quite revealing. It says, "World peace cannot be safeguarded without the making of creative efforts proportionate to the dangers which threaten it."
Romantic.
To the point. The declaration essentially proposed the creation of a European coal and steel community, whose members would pool coal and steel production, which were, as you mentioned, Martina, the most important materials at the time, especially for the armaments industry. And the idea was simple. By merging their economic interests, European nations would render war not merely unthinkable, but materially impossible. Whoever did not control coal and steel production would not be able to fight a war. So let's all share this scarce resource, and because we all control parts of it, maybe parts of the supply chain or just the raw material as such, none of us on its own will be able to fight the others. And as Schuman said it in the declaration, the pooling of coal and steel production will change the destinies of those regions which have long been devoted to the manufacture of munitions of war, of which they have been the most constant victims.
So, France and Germany.
That's a nod to France and Germany. And all of this is happening on the 9th of May, 1950, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in France. And there are a few actions that are already sketched out in the declaration. Schuman already says coal and steel must be placed under a common high authority within the framework of an organization open to the participation of other European countries. So while he's targeting France and Germany, he's also opening the door to a lot of other countries.
That's visionary in him.
And he is so visionary that he even outlines the tasks that this common high authority could carry out. Task number 1, modernize coal and steel production and improve its quality. Number 2, make sure that there are identical terms of supply of coal and steel for the French and German markets and the markets of other member countries. Number 3, let's ensure the common development of exports to other countries. Number 4, let's equalize and improve the living conditions of workers in these industries. Very important after all these strikes. And number 5, let's immediately free the movement of coal and steel between member countries, duty-free.
I have a fun fact for you. He explicitly mentions let's make the production of coal with more quality. The interesting part is that after the war and when European coal production was stifled, it had to be renewed basically from the scratch. So Europe depended a lot on American coal, actually. But it was of such a poor quality that they needed to import a lot more to get the same output, so the same effect.
Wow.
Tragic. So maybe that was the reason where he was like, we have to make it better.
Yeah, we need to make coal good again. Not a great acronym, but
No.
what is great is the idea. And Robert Schuman pronounces this declaration famously on the 9th of May 1950, today known as Europe Day. And right away, German Chancellor Adenauer loves the idea. He's like, I'm all in. So Schumann's got Germany in the back, and the results are telling. The next year, 18th of April 1951, the Treaty of Paris is signed. And it's not signed just by France and Germany. There are 4 other countries that join in: Italy, Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. And this is the birth of Europe as a peace initiative, with 6 founding members, also known as the Inner Six, which could be the title of a Tarantino movie.
I would watch it.
And the Treaty of Paris immediately creates the European Coal and Steel Community in 1952, which is when the treaty enters into force. And its immediate objective is to establish a common market for coal and steel, surprise, surprise. But it also aims to lay the foundations of an economic community that would gradually become a political union. So moving from just economic interests to political interests, shared values. This treaty establishes a higher authority, as envisioned by Schuman, a common assembly, a special council of ministers, and also a court of justice. And all of this would go on to become the institutions of the European Union of today, meaning the European Commission, the European Parliament, the European Council, and the Court of Justice. This is the beginning of Europe's first supranational community.
Wow. I have nothing else to say.
I agree. It's like, wow, what the heck? Robert Schuman, way to go from tiny town in Luxembourg to the European community of coal and steel. And it doesn't stop there. You would think Schuman is done. Well, he's not.
I blame it on celibacy.
Too much free time, too much energy. Well, he put it to good use because in 1958, he becomes the first president of the predecessor to the European Parliament, which at the time was called the European Parliamentary Assembly. And for 2 years, between 1958 and 1960, he presided this European Parliamentary Assembly. And when he leaves office, the Assembly bestows on him the title of Father of Europe. How's that?
Good. Impressive.
I mean, it's pretty badass. Father of Europe. Nobody's called me Father of Europe ever. I mean, not that they should, but like if somebody ever did, I would be like, wow, I picked in life.
Yeah, but you know what's even more impressive?
What?
Being a saint.
He's not a saint yet. But there is a public holiday, 9th of May, which is known as Europe Day.
It's not even his birthday.
It's not his birthday, but it's a Schuman Declaration Day. And, okay, granted, it's not a public holiday everywhere in Europe, but at least it's a public holiday in Brussels, at least for those working in the European Union institutions. That's something. That's cool.
Better
Do you have
than
a
nothing.
holiday because of something you've done, Martina? Is there like a Martina Day?
Give me time. I'm not 59 yet.
Okay, well, I'll give you time. But at this time, Schuman doesn't have a lot of time left. He dies on the 4th of September 1963 in Lorraine in Chazelle at the age of 77.
I would say it's a good age.
I think he's pretty young.
Huh.
I think he could have done so much more. He had like at least, 20 years to do other stuff. But at the same time, what else are you going to do? Like, you already founded Europe. Okay, anyways, Martina, what are the main takeaways of Schuman's life? We've gone from birth to death.
Well, people usually mention peace in Europe as like one of the most important outcomes of Schuman Declaration. I don't know, Victor, would you say peace in Europe is his legacy?
That's a very good question. I'd say yes, I tend to agree. I think that today, at least among European nations, those that are members of this club that we know as the European Union, there is peace.
That's true. But we also have to think about how we define peace. Is it absence of armed conflict? Or is it generally time of equality, collaboration, and prosperity for all? Because at that time, so second half of 20th century, France fought numerous wars after Second World War, actually. So Vietnam, Algeria, Madagascar, Tunisia, and let's not forget Cold War as well. So peace, at least, is something that's debatable.
That's true, but he did not mention any of these countries in his declaration. I think he was focused on something else, and you cannot blame everything on Schuman or attribute everything to Schuman, but it's a good point. Are we talking about peace within Europe, peace outside of Europe? I do agree with you that Europeans tend to think that one of the main benefits of the European Union, and this consistently ranks at the very top at every single Eurobarometer survey, is peace. Peace, the euro, and the Erasmus Plus program.
What about blueprint for today's EU institutions?
That's definitely something we have to give to Robert Schuman. The European Coal and Steel Community gave way to the European Economic Community and subsequently to the European Union. And here I'm going to quote what a document of the European Union says: still run by the innovative type of European institutions conceived in 1950. So European Union officials seems to be very proud of the kind of institutions that were blueprinted by Robert Schuman on 9th of May 1950. And I have to say, I agree that Europe is still run by that type of European institutions that were conceived back then. I'm not so sure that we can still call them innovative, but they have endured.
That is true. They have endured, or at least are enduring for now.
Indeed. And Schuman also supported a common European defense policy. And maybe this circles back to your own argument, Martina, because this speaks of peace, but also at the same time speaks of the need to defend Europe.
Maybe today more than ever.
So, Martina, my last question is, do you consider then that Robert Schuman is a good guy, a bad guy, or just another regular Eurocrat?
Well, I thought about this question a lot in the last few weeks. I would say at the end of it all, I would call him neutral.
Neutral was not an option.
I'm gonna make it my option. Or if I have to choose between what I was offered, then let's call it a regular European Eurocrat.
I think he's a prototype of a Eurocrat. And I don't say that in a mean way or a bad way. I think we need bureaucrats. We need Eurocrats. We need a bureaucracy. It might be a little bit gray, might be a little bit boring, but that's what goes on to endure.
I don't want to say that on a record, but I'm glad you said it.
Thank you. So you're glad I said something that you would have regretted yourself. That's a high note. That was our episode on Robert Schuman.
If you enjoyed the episode, please consider leaving a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps others discover the show.
You can also follow EU Untangled on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Blue Sky to stay updated on future episodes and behind-the-scenes content.
We'd love to hear from you, whether it's a feedback on this episode, ideas for future topics, or just a hello. Just send us an email at mail@untangled-podcast.eu.
Thanks for listening, and see you next time.
See you. No,
Bye.
hear from you.
What?
See you. Who's gonna see us?
I don't know. Maybe people will recognize us on the street. They'll hear us talking, and they'll be like, "Oh, I know that voice."
Do you wanna say it again? Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's good. It's fine. Bye.